the folks on my side of the family that were musicians, the Tios and the Pavajos, some of them formed a colony and went to Mexico. They became an exile colony in Mexico. And that colony was called the Eureka Colony, which a lot of people don't know about. It was about 100 Creole families that formed an agricultural cooperative in Tampico, Mexico. Luis Tio and Lorenzo Tio were born there in Mexico, and in fact, they were jokingly called the Mexicans when they came back. So they were taught by their father, Thomas Tio, the classically trained. Of course, they had the influence of Mexico. Mexican music, influenced them, and they, as part of my family, came back to New Orleans right at 1870s when jazz was starting to sort of form. One of the things that they were involved with is that at the time I was telling you about, New Orleans had sort of a well-defined musical community. Mm-hmm. They had venues. They had places that they played for balls, and it was a musical city, a very musical city. And so my relatives came back right at the time when jazz was starting to form. They started some of the earliest jazz bands. Two of the people that are on the cover, one is Luis Tio Jr., who taught probably I would say 90% of all the top clarinet players that you know in jazz. Johnny Dodds, Barney Biggards, Sidney Bechet, all the giants of jazz he taught or lent instruments to, and played with them as well. He started one of the earliest jazz bands, the Excelsior Jazz Band, with his brother and his two cousins. And so they were seriously involved in starting some of the early jazz bands and playing in venues. My other relative who's on the cover is Alcide Pavageau. He was known as a dancer as well, but he was a famous bass player. Played at Preservation Hall for probably 40 years. Grand Marshal of the second line in New Orleans. And so these guys are up until this book. There was no. I did the genealogy, and up until this book, there had been individual stuff written on all of them, especially the Tios. Charles Kinzer did a PhD on the Tios, talking about their musical influence on the evolution of jazz, and he's much more knowledgeable about the instruments they played and what they played and how they how they use their instruments in different ways that hadn't been used. But he had never made the connection of the genealogy. So my book connects to genealogy and kind of fits the story together. So what we have is a network of family members who are musical, have musical educations, have time to play music because they're not burdened with slavery, and then they're joining societies. From as early as 1830, they're joining the Society of Coname and Le Jeune Ami and all these different societies that were within the Creole community, and those societies needed people to play at their balls and dances.